Are you facing any of these issues? Your children no longer listen to you like they used to, they ignore you or even brush off what you say the moment you walk out the door. It's a sign that the dynamic between parent and child has shifted dramatically. You feel frustrated, sitting alone and wondering why, after decades of raising them, enduring every hardship and sacrifice to give them a good life and a perfect environment to grow, they now disrespect you and, worse, see you as a burden in their lives. Today, we're not going to talk about the health of the elderly or share stories and perspectives on the challenges of aging, the most sensitive stage of life. You might feel hurt or angry when your kids treat you with less respect than you deserve, and that disappointment floods your thoughts. All of it becomes a poison that slowly kills you from the inside. Many wonder why they have to feel this way, but by the time you're over 70, you can become as vulnerable as a child. And that vulnerability directly affects the quality of life for seniors and how long you'll live. But here's the harsh truth: no matter how angry or disappointed you get, I have to tell you it won't solve your problem. In fact, it can backfire and make things worse than you imagine. So, what can you do? There's a way to effectively address this issue, to reclaim your place and the respect you deserve in your children's minds, without arguing, fighting, getting angry, or hurting yourself with foolish thoughts. Today, join me as we explore 6 powerful secrets to change your kids' disrespectful attitudes. These are simple yet impactful adjustments in how you respond and carry yourself that can completely shift how they see you. Stick around until the end of this video, and you'll discover how to regain your rightful place, earning the respect and admiration you want in life, simply and naturally. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please support us by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, type 1 in the comments. If you don't, type 0 so I can know and improve for you. And don't forget to share your thoughts on this content. Now, let's get started. Action 1: Stop chasing their approval. There's a moment in life that hits you like a shock. The harder you try to win someone's approval, the less they seem to value you. For parents, this truth stings most when it comes from your own kids. You've poured years into raising them, late nights, endless sacrifices, putting their needs above your own. But then, one day, you notice a shift. Maybe they shrug off your advice or meet your efforts with indifference. It hurts, doesn't it? Your instinct might be to do more, give more, bend further, hoping they'll finally see your worth. But here's the raw truth I've learned: chasing their approval doesn't bring respect. It often pushes it further away. Why does this happen? It's simple yet profound. When you constantly seek their validation, saying yes when your heart says no, or reshaping your life to fit theirs, you're trying to prove your place matters in their eyes. You're teaching them that your feelings, time, and voice come second, less important than theirs. It's not that they're cruel or ungrateful, it's human nature. People, even those we love most, value what stands firm, what doesn't bend easily. Respect doesn't grow from endless giving, it grows from self-respect. And the moment you stop chasing, stop trying, they start seeing you differently, not as someone desperate to please, but as someone worthy of respect. Let me paint you a picture with a story. There was a woman named Clara, a mother of 2 grown sons, who carried a warmth that could light up any room. In her younger days, she was a force, independent, decisive, the kind of person who knew her worth. But as her sons built their own lives, she felt them drifting. They called less, dismissed her suggestions about their careers or relationships, and sometimes snapped when she offered help. Clara's heart ached. She didn't want to lose them, so she tried harder. She'd cook their favorite meals when they visited, drop everything to babysit, and bite her tongue when they spoke harshly. If I just show them how much I care, she thought, they'll change. But they didn't. The more she gave, the less they seemed to notice. One son stopped thanking her for meals, the other started treating her help like an expectation, not a gift. Clara felt invisible, like a shadow in their busy lives. Then, one rainy afternoon, something clicked. She was cleaning up after a visit, alone, as usual, when she caught her reflection in the kitchen window. Who am I doing this for? She asked herself. Not for her, she realized, but for a version of love that left her empty. So Clara decided to try something new. She stopped bending over backwards. The next time her eldest asked her to babysit on short notice, she paused and said, "I'd love to help, but I've got plans this time." It wasn't a lie, she'd started a painting class, something just for her. When her youngest called to vent about his job, instead of rushing to fix it, she listened and said, "You're smart, I know. You'll figure it out." At first, they bristled. They weren't used to this Clara, the one who didn't jump at their every need. But over weeks, then months, a shift happened. Her eldest started asking about her paintings, curious about this new spark in her life. Her youngest thanked her, really thanked her, when she stepped in to help. They began seeing her not as a fixture to lean on, but as a person with her own light. The logic is clear when you break it down. When you chase approval, you hand over your power, signaling that their opinion defines your worth. But when you stop, when you choose yourself, set gentle boundaries, and let your actions whisper, "I matter too," you take that power back. It's not about being cold or distant, it's about balance. Clara didn't stop loving her sons, she just stopped needing them to love her a certain way. And in that space, respect grew naturally. So, if your kid's respect feels out of reach, don't run harder after it. Pause. Look inward. Ask yourself, am I chasing something I already deserve? Start small. Say no when it's right, speak your truth even if it wavers, prioritize your joy. It won't happen overnight, but slowly, they'll notice. They'll see a parent who stands tall, not one who pleads. And over time, the respect you crave, it'll find its way back, not because you demanded it, but because you lived it. Action 2, don't argue, lead by example. There's a moment every parent knows too well. Your child, maybe now grown and living their own life, cuts you off mid-sentence, rolls their eyes at your advice, or speaks to you with a sharpness you'd rather not admit. Your chest tightens, and words spill out fast. You want to argue, to push back, to remind them of the years you guided them, loved them, held them up. Listen to me, you want to shout. I deserve your respect. But here's a quiet truth I've learned. Arguing doesn't win respect. It's like trying to catch smoke with your hands, the harder you grab, the more it slips away. Instead, there's a gentler, stronger way, don't fight for it. Show it. Why doesn't arguing work? Think about it. When you meet disrespect with a raised voice or a sharp comeback, you're stepping into their game. You're proving they can rattle you, that they hold the reins. It's human to feel angry, after all, you've given so much, but respect isn't won in a shouting match. It's not about who's louder or who's right. It's about presence, about how you carry yourself when the air gets heavy. When you argue, you're begging for something they've already decided not to give. But when you lead by example, when you respond with calm, with dignity, with a strength that doesn't need proving, you plant a seed. You show them what respect looks like, not through words, but through who you are. Let me tell you about Daniel, a man who taught me this lesson without even knowing it. Daniel was a widower in his late 60s, a former mechanic with hands that told stories of hard work and care. He'd raised 3 daughters, now each with families of their own. For years, he was their rock, fixing cars, offering advice, cheering at every milestone. But over time, things shifted. His daughters started talking over him at family dinners, brushing off his suggestions about their kids or finances with a quick, "Dad, times have changed." Once, his youngest even snapped, "You don't get it," when he tried to share a story from his past. Daniel felt it deep in his bones. He remembered when his words carried weight. At first, he pushed back. He'd argue, his voice rising as he listed all he'd done for them, how he'd worked overtime to pay for their school, how he'd stayed up nights worrying. "I deserve better than this," he'd say, frustration spilling over. But the arguments only widened the gap. His daughters dug in, their responses sharper, their visits shorter. Daniel felt like he was losing them, and it broke his heart. Then, one evening, sitting alone in his garage, he had a quiet epiphany. Maybe they don't need my words, he thought. Maybe they need to see me. So Daniel changed. The next time his middle daughter interrupted him, he didn't snap back. He paused, took a slow breath, and said, "I'll wait until you're ready to hear me." His tone was even, not angry, just firm. When his youngest dismissed his advice about car repairs, he didn't argue. He gave a faint smile, nodded, and said, "All right. Let me know if you need help." He stopped chasing their attention with debates and started acting like a man who knew his worth. He'd listen, really listen, then speak when it felt right, his voice steady and calm. He didn't demand respect, he lived it. And something shifted. At first, his daughters didn't know what to do with it. They braced for a fight that never came. But over time, they softened. His eldest started asking his opinion on her garden, listening as he shared tricks from years past. His youngest called one day, sheepish, asking for help with the car he'd offered to fix. They began seeing him not as a voice to drown out, but as a presence to lean on, a man who didn't need to yell to be heard. Daniel didn't win them over with words, he won them with the quiet strength of his example. The reasoning here is simple but deep. Arguing feeds a cycle of disrespect, it's a tug-of-war no one wins. But when you step back, when you hold your ground with grace instead of anger, you break that cycle. You show your kids that respect isn't a prize to wrestle for, it's a gift you give yourself first. It's in the steady gaze, the measured words, your refusal to bend. Daniel didn't stop loving his daughters, he just stopped begging them to see him. And in that space, they did. So, if your kids' words sting or their silence cuts, resist the urge to argue. Breathe. Stand tall. Let your actions, your calm, your confidence, your dignity, speak louder than any fight could. It's not easy, especially when emotions run high, but it's powerful. Over time, they'll feel the weight of your example, and the respect you've lost. It'll find its way back, not by force, but by the quiet light you shine. Action 3. Pull back your emotional dependence. There's a quiet ache that creeps in as we age, a longing to feel needed, especially by the kids we've given our lives to. You've loved them fiercely, built your world around them, and now, as they carve out their own paths, you might find yourself waiting. Waiting for a call, a visit, a sign you still matter. It's natural to want their love and respect to fill your days, to lean on them for that warm glow of purpose. But here's a gentle truth I've come to see: when you depend on your kids for emotional fulfillment, you hand them a weight they didn't ask for. And instead of drawing them closer, it can push them away. The way to win their respect isn't to need them more, it's to need them less. Why does this shift happen? It's a matter of balance, subtle but real. When your happiness hinges on their attention, when you light up only when they call or dim when they don't, they sense it. It's not that they stop caring, it's that your need becomes a silent pressure. They might feel burdened, even trapped, by the unspoken expectation that they're responsible for your joy. And when people, even your kids, feel that weight, they pull back. They might grow distant, impatient, or worse, start seeing you as fragile, someone to manage rather than respect. But here's the flip side: when you stand on your own, when your heart doesn't lean too hard on theirs, they're free to come to you, not out of duty, but out of admiration. Let me share a story about a woman named Grace, who showed me this truth in vivid color. Grace was a retired nurse in her early 70s, a mother to 2 grown daughters with busy lives of their own. She'd always been their anchor, bandaging scraped knees, cheering at recitals, listening through teenage storms. But as her daughters built careers and families, Grace felt the ground shift beneath her. They called less often, their visits rushed, and she found herself lonelier than she'd expected. Her days felt empty, so she reached out. She'd call them with updates, small things, like the roses blooming in her yard, hoping they'd linger on the line. When they didn't, she'd ask when they'd visit, her voice soft with longing. "I just miss you," she'd say, and she meant it. But instead of closeness, she felt a growing distance. Her daughter's replies grew short: "Mom, I'm swamped," or "We'll try, but it's hectic." Grace didn't understand. She'd given them everything, why couldn't they give her this? One evening, sitting by a silent phone, she felt a sharp pang of clarity. "I'm waiting for them to fill me," she realized, "but that's not their job." It hurt to see it, but it also sparked something. Grace decided to stop leaning so hard. She picked up knitting needles she hadn't touched in years and joined a local group. She started walking with a neighbor, laughing over coffee afterward. She planted new flowers, not just to tell her daughters about, but for herself. She didn't stop loving them, she just stopped needing them to complete her. And then, something beautiful happened. One day, her eldest called, curious. "Mom, what's this knitting thing? Send me a picture." Her youngest showed up unannounced, kids in tow, saying, "We want to see your garden, Mom." They weren't responding to her pleas, they were drawn to her light. Grace's days were full now, not with waiting, but with living. Her daughters saw a woman who didn't cling, who shone on her own, and their respect crept back, not forced, but earned. They texted more, visited with ease, not because she demanded it, but because they wanted to be near her strength. The logic goes like this: emotional dependence shifts the power. When you lean on your kids to feel whole, you give them control over your worth, and that can breed distance, not closeness. But when you pull back that need, when you find joy in your own hands, your own steps, you take that power back. It's not about cutting them off, it's about freeing them to see you again. Grace didn't stop being a mom, she started being herself again. And in that shift, her daughters found a woman they couldn't help but admire. So, if you feel that ache, that pull to lean on your kids for meaning, pause. Look at your life, what lights you up beyond them. Start there, small and steady, a book, a walk, a friend. It's not selfish, it's strength. You're not pushing love away, you're building a foundation for it to grow. Over time, they'll notice. They'll see a parent who doesn't just need, but thrives. And the respect you've missed? It'll come, not because you clung to them, but because you let yourself shine. Action 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. There's a quiet truth we don't always want to face: people treat us the way we let them. As a parent, you've spent years giving time, love, patience, often without a second thought. But then comes a day when your grown kids cross a line. Maybe they snap at you over something small, dismiss your feelings like they don't matter, or act like your presence is an afterthought. It cuts deep, and part of you wants to brush it off, to keep the peace, to avoid a fight. But here's what I've learned: if you don't draw a line, they won't either. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing your kids away, it's about showing them where you stand and holding that ground with calm, steady strength. Why do boundaries matter? It's simple but profound. Without them, you're sending a message: my worth can be bent. When you let disrespect slide, when you stay quiet as they interrupt or swallow the hurt when they ignore you, you're teaching them it's okay. Not because they're mean or careless, but because people, even the ones we've raised, test limits. They'll go as far as we allow. But when you set a boundary, when you say, "This is what I'll accept, and this is what I won't," you're not just protecting yourself. You're showing them respect isn't optional, it's the foundation. And enforcing it? That's where the magic happens. It's not loud or harsh, it's firm, and it changes how they see you. Let me tell you about Rosa, a woman who brought this to life for me. Rosa was in her late 50s, a single mom who'd raised 2 sons with grit and grace. She'd worked long hours as a seamstress to feed them, cheered at their soccer games, and stitched up their broken dreams. But as her sons hit their 30s, something shifted. They'd call her with demands. "Mom, can you watch the kids tonight?" Without a please or thank you. At family gatherings, they'd cut her off mid-story or, worse, critique her cooking with a laugh that wasn't kind. Rosa felt it like a slow burn. She'd always been their soft place to land. Why did it now feel like they were walking all over her? For a while, she let it slide. "They're busy," she told herself, "and I don't want trouble." But one Sunday, as she cleared the table alone after they left early, again, she stopped. "I'm more than this," she whispered to herself. Rosa decided it was time to set some rules. The next time her eldest called last minute to drop off the grandkids, she took a breath and said, "I'd love to help, but I need notice. I've got my own plans too." Her voice was gentle, but it didn't waver. When her youngest interrupted her at dinner, she met his eyes and said, "I'm speaking. You'll get your turn." And when he smirked and tried again, she stood up, calm, and left the table. "We'll talk when you're ready to listen," she said over her shoulder. At first, her sons pushed back. They grumbled, "Why are you being dramatic?" and tested her resolve. But Rosa stayed steady. She didn't yell or guilt trip, she just held her ground. If they couldn't speak to her with basic kindness, she'd step away. No lectures, no scenes, just quiet consistency. And then, something shifted. Her eldest started calling ahead, asking instead of assuming. Her youngest paused one night, mid-sentence, and said, "Sorry, Mom, go ahead." They didn't just hear her, they saw her. Rosa wasn't a doormat anymore, she was a woman who valued herself enough to say, "Enough." And that strength? It pulled respect out of them like a tide. Here's the logic, laid bare: boundaries aren't walls, they're signposts. They tell your kids, "This is where I begin." Without them, you blur, easy to overlook. But when you enforce them, calmly, consistently, you're not just asking for respect, you're claiming it. It's not about control, it's about clarity. Rosa didn't stop loving her sons, she stopped letting love mean silence. She showed them her time, her voice, her heart had weight. And when they saw she wouldn't budge, they adjusted, not out of fear, but recognition. So, if your kids' words or actions make you feel small, don't shrink. Draw a line, gently, firmly. Maybe it's, "I'll talk when you're ready to listen," or "I need respect to keep this going." Then hold it. They might test you, and that's okay, it means they're learning. You're not shutting them out, you're inviting them to meet you where you stand. Over time, they'll cross that line, not because you force them, but because they'll see a parent worth crossing for. Respect isn't shouted, it's stood. And when you do, they'll follow. Action 5. Stop giving without gratitude. There's a rhythm to parenting that feels almost sacred. You give. You give your time, your energy, your heart, often expecting nothing in return. It's what you do, driving them to practice, cooking their favorite meals, dropping everything when they need you. But then, somewhere along the way, you might notice a shift. Your grown kids take it all in stride. No, thank you, no pause to see the love behind it, just an assumption you'll always be there. It's a quiet hurt, isn't it? You want to keep giving, to keep that bond alive, but here's a gentle truth I've come to see: when you give without gratitude, you're not building closeness, you're building expectation. And the way to change that? Stop pouring into a cup that doesn't know it's full. Why does this matter? It's a delicate dance of worth. When you keep giving, your support, your time, your kindness, and they don't acknowledge it, you're sending a signal: this is free. Not because they're selfish, but because people, even our kids, get used to what's always there. They stop seeing your effort as a gift and start seeing it as a given. And when that happens, respect fades. They don't value what costs them nothing to receive. But when you pause, when you hold back until your giving is met with gratitude, you're not just protecting yourself. You're teaching them your love has weight, that it's precious, not endless. It's not about withholding affection, it's about making it matter. Let me tell you about Henry, a man who showed me this truth in action. Henry was in his 60s, a father of 3, the family fixer. He'd spent decades being the one they turned to, lending cash for car repairs, babysitting on a whim, even fixing leaky faucets at their homes. His kids called him Reliable Henry, and he wore it like a badge. But as they settled into their own lives, something changed. They'd ask for help. Dad, can you spot me $200? Or, can you watch the kids tonight? And he'd always say yes. Yet the thank yous stopped. They'd grab the cash and run, or wave the kids off without a, "You're appreciated, Dad." Henry felt it like a slow drip, unseen, unvalued. At first, he brushed it off. "They're busy," he muttered, convincing himself it didn't matter. But one Saturday, after driving an hour to fix his daughter's sink, only to get an, "Oh, cool, thanks," while she scrolled her phone, Henry stopped. "I'm more than a handyman," he thought. He didn't want to stop helping, but he wanted it to mean something. So he tried something new. The next time his son called for a loan, Henry said, "I can help, but I need to know it matters to you." His son blinked, surprised, then nodded, "Yeah, Dad, it does. Thanks." When his youngest asked for last-minute babysitting, Henry replied, "I'd love to, but I've got plans tonight. Let's find a time that works." His voice was kind, not cold, just firm. The shift wasn't instant. At first, the kids bristled. "What's up with Dad?" Used to his automatic yes. But Henry held steady. He didn't lecture or sulk, he just stopped giving when it felt unappreciated. If they didn't see his effort, he'd wait. And then, something clicked. One day, his daughter called, not to ask, but to say, "Hey Dad, thanks for last week, I didn't realize how much you do." His son paid him back with a handshake and a grin, "You're the best, Dad." They started noticing, not because he demanded it, but because he made his giving a choice, not a reflex. Henry didn't stop being their dad, he started being a dad they couldn't take for granted. Here's the logic, gentle but clear: giving without gratitude trains them to expect, not appreciate. It's not about keeping score, it's about balance. When you give endlessly, they stop seeing the cost, your time, your energy, your heart. But when you pull back, when you tie your generosity to their recognition, you reset the scales. Henry didn't stop loving his kids, he stopped letting love mean invisible. He showed them his effort wasn't a bottomless well, but a valued gift. And when they saw that, they cherished him. So, if your giving feels unnoticed, breathe. Step back. Ask yourself, am I pouring into a void? Next time they ask, pause, say yes when it feels right, no when it doesn't, and let them know why. It's not punishment, it's a lesson in worth. You're not closing your heart, you're opening their eyes. Over time, they'll see what your giving is, a treasure, not a habit. And the respect you've missed? It'll bloom, not because you held back, but because you showed it's worth earning. Action 6. Build a life beyond them. There's a deep love in parenting that makes it your compass, your kids, your world, your everything. For years, you've spun your days around them, their joys lighting yours, their needs shaping your hours. But as they grow and step into their own lives, you might feel a quiet drift, a sense that the center you built is shifting. It's tempting to cling, to keep them as your son, hoping their attention will warm you. But here's a gentle truth I've come to treasure: when your happiness orbits them alone, they don't just carry your love, they carry your weight. The way to earn their respect isn't to hold tighter, it's to build a life that shines beyond them. Why does this work? It's about how we're seen. When your kids are your sole source of purpose, when your days hinge on their calls, their visits, their nod of approval, they feel it. It's not that they stop loving you, it's that they start seeing you as an extension of them, not a hole on your own. And people, even our kids, respect what stands out, what has its own roots, its own glow. If they think you're waiting, always available, they might feel crowded, or worse, see you as someone with nothing else to claim. But when you step into your own life, when you weave joy from threads they didn't spin, they look at you anew. You're not just their parent, you're a person they admire. Let me tell you about Lila, a woman who painted this truth for me in vivid strokes. Lila was in her late 60s, a mother to 2 sons who'd left the nest, one a lawyer, the other a teacher with a young family. She'd been their heartbeat, sewing costumes for school plays, hosting late-night study sessions, cheering at every win. But as her sons built their lives, Lila felt the silence grow. They'd call maybe once a week, their voices rushed, "Love you, Mom, gotta go." Visits were rare, squeezed between their schedules. Lila missed them fiercely. She'd sit by the window, replaying memories, waiting for them to fill her days again. "They're my everything," she'd say, her voice soft with yearning. But waiting left her hollow. One crisp fall day, flipping through an old photo album alone, Lila paused. They have their lives, she thought, but what about mine? She didn't want to lose them, she wanted to find herself. So she started small. She signed up for a pottery class, her hands shaky as they touched clay for the first time in decades. She joined a hiking group, her lungs filling with mountain air and laughter. She even volunteered at a local shelter, cuddling kittens and swapping stories with new friends. Lila didn't stop loving her sons, she just stopped needing them to define her. And then, something shifted, like sunlight through clouds. Her eldest called one night, curious. "Mom, you're hiking now? Tell me about it." Her youngest showed up with his kids, grinning, "We want to see your pots, Grandma." They weren't just checking in, they were drawn in. Lila's eyes sparkled as she showed off a lopsided vase or recounted a trail mishap. Her son started texting pictures, "Look, I tried clay too." And planning visits, not out of duty, but delight. They saw a woman alive, not waiting, a mom with stories they hadn't scripted. Lila didn't pull away from them, she grew toward herself. And in that growth, their respect bloomed, not demanded, but discovered. The logic here is gentle but mighty. When your life revolves around your kids, you shrink into their shadow. They don't mean to dim you, it's just what dependence looks like. But when you build something beyond, hobbies, friends, passions, you step into your own light. It's not about distance, it's about depth. Lila didn't stop being a mom, she started being Lila again. She showed her sons she wasn't a satellite to their orbit, but a star with her own shine. And that independence? It pulled them closer, not because she needed them, but because they wanted her. So, if you feel that drift, that urge to live through your kids, pause. Look around, what moves you, beyond them? Start small, a class, a walk, a purpose. It's not about leaving them, it's about finding you. You're not abandoning love, you're enriching it. Over time, they'll notice. They'll see a parent who doesn't just wait, but thrives. And the respect you crave? It'll come, not because you chased it, but because you lived it, boldly, beautifully, your way. Life with our kids is like a tapestry, threads of love, sacrifice, and hope woven over years. But when those threads fray, when their respect grows distant, it's easy to feel lost, wondering where we went wrong. You might want to shout, pull them back, demand the respect you've earned. Yet, through these 6 actions, a quieter path emerges, one that doesn't fight for respect but invites it. It's not about changing them, it's about changing how we stand in their light. Stop chasing their approval, and you'll see your worth isn't theirs to give, it's yours to hold. Led by example, and your dignity will speak louder than any argument. Pull back your emotional dependence, and they'll see a strength that doesn't waver but lifts. Set boundaries, and you'll teach them your heart has edges worth honoring. Stop giving without gratitude, and your generosity will shine as a gift, not a given. Build a life beyond them, and they'll meet you not as a shadow, but a flame. This isn't retreat, it's stepping into yourself. Each action is a brushstroke, painting a picture of a parent who loves deeply yet stands tall. It won't happen overnight, change rarely does. They might resist, stumble, or wonder at first. But over time, they'll see you, not as someone awaiting their nod, but as a whole, worthy, radiant person. Respect won't come because you demanded it, it'll come because you lived it. So take that first step. You're not just reclaiming their respect, you're rediscovering your own. And in that quiet strength, you'll find something beautiful, a bond rebuilt, not on need, but on mutual awe. You've always been enough. Now, let them see it too.